In a world cloaked in darkness, where the dead rest and nightmares awaken, if you dare to listen, you're about to step into the shadows of midnight screams. Not everyone who enters makes it out alive.
The familiar red and white stripes of the KFC sign shone brightly against the evening sky, a symbol of comfort food and friendly faces. For Emily, it was more than just a job. It was a way to support her family while she finished her degree. But as she clocked in for her first night shift, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this particular KFC location. Rumors had circulated among the staff for years. Strange noises, unexplained cold spots, and the feeling of being watched. Most dismissed them as urban legends or tricks of the mind after long hours. But Emily couldn't ignore the chill that ran down her spine every time she walked past the old storage room in the back. The KFC had been there for decades, one of the first in the region. It had been remodeled numerous times. There were still remnants of its past lurking in the shadows. An old-timer, Mr. Thompson, had once told her that the land the KFC stood on had a dark history, but he never elaborated. Emily didn't think much of it until she experienced her first eerie encounter. Emily's first brush with the supernatural occurred late one night. The restaurant was empty, and she was alone at the counter, closing up. The usual hum of the kitchen equipment was interrupted by a faint whispering, just barely audible. She stopped, straining to hear, but the sound vanished as quickly as it had appeared. She shook her head, chalking it up to exhaustion, and continued her work. As she wiped down the counters, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that someone was watching her. She finished her tasks and headed to the back to clock out. As she walked through the kitchen, she noticed that the deep fryer was still on. She was sure she had turned it off earlier. Frowning, she approached it and reached for the switch. Just as she was about to turn it off, the fryer suddenly clicked off on its own. She froze, her hand hovering in the air. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and a chill ran down her spine. Deciding not to dwell on it, she hurried out of the kitchen, eager to leave. The next night, the lights began to flicker. Emily was in the back, organizing supplies, when the overhead lights started to dim and brighten erratically. She felt a sudden drop in temperature, the kind that made her breath visible in the air. A cold hand seemed to brush against her neck, and she spun around, heart pounding, but saw nothing. Frightened, she rushed out of the storage room, not daring to look back. As she stepped into the hallway leading to the dining area, the flickering lights followed her. The shadows on the walls seemed to twist and move, creating eerie shapes that played tricks on her eyes. Emily quickened her pace, her footsteps echoing loudly in the empty restaurant. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see someone, or something, following her. But the hallway remained empty. Reaching the front counter, Emily tried to steady her breathing. She pulled out her phone and called Mark, her co-worker and friend. He picked up after a few rings, his voice groggy. "Mark, it's Emily. I know it's late, but something weird is happening here. The lights are flickering and I felt something cold touch my neck. Can you come over? I don't want to be here alone." Mark agreed to come by, sensing the urgency in her voice. While waiting for him, Emily decided to keep herself busy to distract from the growing sense of dread. She began to tidy up the dining area, wiping down tables and straightening chairs. As she worked, she heard the faint whispering again. This time, it was closer, more distinct. She could make out words, though they were still too faint to understand. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. Emily jumped, her heart racing. She grabbed a nearby broom and slowly made her way towards the noise, her hands trembling. She peeked around the corner and saw that a stack of trays had fallen off the counter, scattering across the floor. The deep fryer was on again, bubbling away despite no one being near it. Terrified, Emily backed away, bumping into a table. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. She could hear it clearly now, though it was still incomprehensible. The lights flickered wildly, plunging the room into brief moments of darkness. Emily felt trapped, unable to leave the restaurant and too scared to stay. Finally, the front door swung open and Mark rushed in. He found Emily standing in the middle of the dining area, clutching the broom and looking pale. He quickly turned off the deep fryer and checked the kitchen, but there was no sign of anyone else. The whispering stopped as soon as he entered, and the lights returned to normal. "Emily, are you okay? What happened?" Mark asked, his voice full of concern. Emily recounted the events, her voice shaking. Mark listened intently, his expression growing serious. "I believe you," he said finally. "Something strange is definitely going on here. We'll figure it out together." Relieved to have someone on her side, Emily felt a little more at ease. But she knew that the events of the past 2 nights were just the beginning. The haunting presence in the restaurant was growing stronger, and she and Mark would have to uncover its secrets before it was too late. Determined to get to the bottom of these disturbances, Emily began to research the history of the KFC and the land it was built on. She spent hours at the local library, sifting through old newspapers and records. Her determination paid off when she discovered that the restaurant had once been the site of an old farmhouse that had burned down in the early 1900s. The tragic fire had claimed the lives of the entire family living there. Local legends whispered that their spirits still haunted the grounds. Emily confided in her co-worker Mark, who admitted he had also experienced strange events. Mark had been hesitant to speak up, fearing ridicule, but Emily's account gave him the courage to share his own encounters: unexplained noises, cold spots, and objects moving on their own. Together, they decided to investigate further, driven by a mix of curiosity and a desire to put an end to the terrifying occurrences. They chose a night when the restaurant was closed for a deep clean, ensuring they would be undisturbed. Armed with flashlights and a voice recorder, they hoped to capture evidence of the supernatural. As they explored the dark corners of the restaurant, the atmosphere grew tense. The familiar hum of the kitchen equipment was replaced by an oppressive silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling. Their first stop was the storage room, the epicenter of many of their eerie experiences. The room felt colder than the rest of the restaurant, and their breath formed clouds in the air. They set up the voice recorder on a shelf and began to ask questions, hoping to elicit a response from any spirits present. "Is anyone here with us?" Emily called out, her voice echoing in the small space. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, faintly, they heard a soft thud, as if something had fallen over in the corner. They shone their flashlights in the direction of the sound, but saw nothing out of place. Mark picked up the recorder and played back the tape, and their hearts raced as they heard a faint, desperate whisper. "Help us!" Encouraged by the response, they moved to the dining area. As they set up the recorder again, they heard footsteps echoing through the empty room. Emily and Mark exchanged nervous glances, but pressed on. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Mark asked. The air seemed to grow heavier, and the temperature dropped even further. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The voice recorder captured the sounds of footsteps growing louder, as if someone was approaching them, but there was no one in sight. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, and they both jumped. They rushed to the kitchen, flashlights darting around in the darkness. Pots and pans lay scattered on the floor, and the deep fryer was bubbling again, though no one had touched it. Emily's hand trembled as she turned off the fryer, and Mark set up the recorder on a counter. "Are you trying to tell us something?" Emily asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. The reply was immediate and chilling. The recorder captured a guttural voice full of pain and anger. "Fire! Trapped! Can't escape!" Emily and Mark looked at each other, understanding dawning in their eyes. The spirits were trapped, reliving the horrors of the fire that had taken their lives. They needed to find a way to help them move on. Their investigation led them to discover a hidden basement beneath the restaurant, a remnant of the old farmhouse. Accessing the basement required prying open a trapdoor they found in the storage room. As they descended into the darkness, they felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The basement was filled with old furniture and debris, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke, as if the fire had just happened. Suddenly, a figure appeared before them, a ghostly apparition of a woman in early 20th century clothing. She reached out to them, her eyes filled with sorrow and desperation. Emily and Mark froze, their flashlights illuminating the spectral figure. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice echoing in the confined space. "Help us find peace." Emily and Mark knew they had to act. They began to search the basement, looking for any clues that might help them understand what the spirits needed. They found old photographs and charred remnants of furniture, remnants of the family's life before the tragedy. As they pieced together the story, the ghostly figure watched, her presence both a comfort and a reminder of the urgency of their task. In a heart-pounding sequence, Emily and Mark worked to find the remains of the family and give them a proper burial. They contacted local authorities and historians, explaining their findings without delving into the supernatural details. With the help of a local historian, they identified the graves of the family members and arranged for a small ceremony to honor their memory. As they did, the restaurant seemed to come alive with activity. Lights flickered, objects moved on their own. The air was filled with the sounds of the past, laughter, conversation, and the distant roar of flames. Emily and Mark stood together, holding candles and saying prayers for the souls of the departed. Finally, the oppressive energy in the basement dissipated, leaving behind a sense of calm and closure. The ghostly figure of the woman smiled, her form becoming fainter until she disappeared entirely. The strange occurrences at the KFC ceased, and the restaurant returned to its normal state. Conclusion. With the spirits laid to rest and the dark energy cleansed, the strange occurrences at the KFC ceased. Emily and Mark shared their story with their colleagues, who were skeptical but intrigued. The experience had changed them, making them more aware of the unseen world around them. As Emily continued her shifts at the restaurant, she often thought about the family and the tragic events that had led to the haunting. She felt a sense of responsibility and respect for the history of the land. The KFC was once again just a regular fast food joint, but Emily knew that the echoes of the past could still be felt, lingering in the shadows, a reminder of the secrets that every old place might hold.